Okay, so reading from Dreams, Evolution, and Value Fulfillment by Jane Roberts, a Seth book, Volume 2. And this video will be finishing Chapter 10. So, pretty cool. So, going into session 934, August 10th, 1981. Man explored the physical world in the dreaming state long before he explored it physically. Such dreams gave him the assurance that other lands existed outside of his own, and spurred him onward into those physical expeditions in which the species has always taken particular delight. A man or woman might be, while dreaming, suddenly in strange territory, looking at the sky from a different viewpoint, with, say, a familiar river nowhere in sight, and with a mountain where ordinarily a plain might be. This was, in a way, as startling an experience as it would be to you to find yourself on some distant planet. You do, for that matter, explore space in the same fashion, and on at least some occasions, your own, quote, visitors from outer space, end quote, are dream travelers from other dimensions of reality. In such a fashion, man learned the location of oceans upon the earth, or at least was given the assurance that such large bodies of water existed, along with clues as to their locations, and the placement of the stars overhead. Also, in the same manner, dreams were an aid in navigation, so that they served to let sailors know when land was near before it could be physically perceived. And there is no human activity to which dreams and group dreams have not contributed. They were of great aid, of course, in human politics, so that through dreams the intents of tribal leaders, say, were known to the others. Some people within the tribe specialized in such dreams, and again, dream content was and is directed by the individual intents, purposes, and interests of the dreamer. In a certain manner, dreaming, then, helped sharpen such individual tendencies, while still directing them toward the public value fulfillment. The person interested most in herbs and plant life would also find that nightly dreams mirrored that daytime preoccupation, so that nightly dream excursions might find the dreamer examining strange herbs in another location than the native one. Or he might be given knowledge as to how the herbs could best be used for healing purposes. People are natural mimics, as are some animals and birds. So when tribal members related their dreams, they did not just tell them, but acted them out with great mobility, carefully mimicking whatever animals or people or elements of land they may have encountered. The origins of drama began in just that fashion. Tribal leaders were usually chosen only after long, quote, dream investigations, end quote, in which the new leader's name cropped up, say, time and time again in the people's dreams. They expected to receive counsel from their dreams. Such information was then aired and shared, studied and examined along with all physical considerations that applied before important decisions were made. You do still continue such activity again, although you have turned your conscious minds away from those directions. Most of it does not become conscious because you do not want it to. In some areas, however, with the acceleration of physical travel, certain kinds of dreams have become more highly pertinent. Families in your society are often broken up, parents and children living quite apart in other portions of the country, or in different countries entirely, so dreams that connect you with such relatives have risen to the fore, so to speak. People often keep track of changes in hometowns that they may not have visited for 20 years, except in the dream state, when they familiarize themselves with the alterations that have happened, visit beloved streets and houses, or view old classmates. Very few people make any attempt to check out such information in physical terms. There is an entire global dream network, in other words, that goes quite unrecognized. One of spectacular organization in which exchanges of information occur that give you the basis for the formation of recognized physical events. If small families kept track of their own family dreams, for example, they could discover unsuspected correlations and sense the interplay of subjective and objective drama, with which they are always psychologically involved. Notice what kind of information you seek out from the newspapers, for example, or I can add the internet now. Do you read the front page and ignore sports, or vice versa? Do you read the gossip column? The obituary? Do you seek out stories of lurid crime? Or look for further incidents of political chicanery? The answers will show you the kind of material you look for most often. You will, to some extent, specialize in the same kind of information when you dream. You will organize the contents of your mind and the information available to you according to your own intents and purposes. One person's dreams, therefore, while his or her own, will still fit into an important notch in the dreams of a given family. One person might, because of his or her own interests, therefore, be the family's dream watchguard, the one who has, say, the nightmares for everyone else. That person will also serve a somewhat similar role in the waking state, as a member of the family. The question in such instances is the reason for such a person's over-concern and alarm in the first place. Why the intense interest in such possible catastrophes, or in crime, or whatever? And the answer lies in an examination of the person's feelings and beliefs about the nature of existence itself. As far as group dreaming is concerned, however, there are still some people who have always served as watchdogs in that regard, while others, even in the dream state, operate as healers or teachers or explorers or whatever. There is no craft that was not first conceived of by an individual dreamer, who later transferred it to the social world of activity. In the dreaming state, then, the needs and desires of families, communities, and countries are well known. The dream state serves as a rich source for the world's knowledge, and is also therefore responsible for the outgrowth of its technology. This is a highly important point, for, quote, the technological world out there, end quote, was at one time the world of dreams. The discoveries and inventions that made the industrial world possible were always latent in man's mind, and represented an inner glittering landscape of probability that he brought into actualization through the use of dreams. The intuitive and the conscious manipulation of material that was at one time latent. Value fulfillment will always provide inner directions that remind man constantly of the best ways in which such technology can be used. The need to possess such knowledge is uppermost in man's mind now, and so it also becomes a vital dream topic or subject. In the dream state, then, to one extent or another, man seeks solutions to the problems of his age. Session 935, August 13th, 1981. He says, "Now, dreams occur at so many levels of reality that it is quite impossible to describe their true scope. For one thing, that scope includes levels that are consciously unknown to you. Dreams serve as backup systems also, for example, in the important communications between various peoples or nations, and particularly when physical communication is cut off between such groups. Dreams provide the continuation of information's flow from one part of the species to another." There are dreams of different import, some triggered genetically, that serve as sparks for particular kinds of behavior. Dreams, in other words, that literally span the centuries in that regard, coiled latently in the very chromosomes, and no level of consciousness is without some kind of participation in dream states. In that regard, even electrons, for example, dream. Dreaming touches upon both microscopic and macroscopic events or realities, and is not simply a human characteristic, appropriately appearing within your own range or within your own species. It is instead one area of subjective experience that is everywhere prevailing within the universe. As I have mentioned many times, animals then dream, as do plants, insects, and all forms of life. All molecular constructions exhibit that certain kind of introspective activity, as if the inner working of some giant computer was intimately in touch not only with its own programming and the probabilities connected with it, but with a deep psychological awareness of the activities of the electrons and various visible and invisible particles that form its own physical construction. You are bound to have, then, many larger dream formations that can only be called group dreams, subjective events in which your own dreams happen, and in which your own dreams take part. You expect all of the elements of the physical world, however diverse, to fit together and form a certain kind of permanency and order. It should be no surprise then that this same kind of, quote, fitting together, end quote, includes subjective life also, or that, say, your private dreams are also fragments in a vaster dream reality. They are as important to the operation of that reality as electrons are to your physical one, providing inner pathways for the accumulation of wisdom and pleasure. There are certain kinds of dreams in which the various species then communicate, and in which the energies of the environment and its inhabitants merge. These include a kind of horizontal psychological extension, the translation of one kind of dream into another kind, the transference of information from one system to another, in which the symbols themselves come alive. I can only hope to invoke some feeling within you that is reminiscent of your own actual behavior at those hidden levels of dreaming activity. But they have remained highly pertinent in the development of all species with their environments, keeping the intents and purposes of one alive in the other. I have told you that in actuality now, no genetic knowledge is gone from the earth. It does not vanish. It is retained in latent form within a kind of backup system, so that in terms of probabilities, each species carries within its own genetic patterns the blueprints and specializations of each other's genetic sequence. Those sequences follow the pursuits of value fulfillment so smoothly that they can be reactivated whenever the conditions are fortunate. For even the animals are not concerned with simple survival alone, nor the plants, but with what I can only call emotional qualities. Qualities that seek a full appreciation and creative extension of those conditions of consciousness that stamp each species as itself and yet join it with all others. In a fashion, your own dreams operate or appear as electrons in other realities. That is, they change their form, their subjective force or direction, and become part of the working mechanics of the universe. The same applies to your own thoughts. They are not quote-unquote wasted after you have thought them or simply discarded. They do not become extinct either, but go on to serve other functions in the universe than those with which you are presently aware. This all involves a lush, multitudinous creativity. The pleasure principle can probably be likened most to the latent appreciation of beauty that is everywhere apparent if you look for it. The ecstasy of each form of life for the wonders of its own existence, in which love's values go beyond themselves, and yet a condition in which each species or life form, quote-unquote, realizes that its own fulfillment adds immeasurably to the existence of all other forms. Seth says, end of session, and adds, we did manage to at least hint of some material that almost exists on the edge, the very edge, of any rational understanding. Let me just add what Jane said after that end of chapter. She says, quote, wow, as soon as she came out of trance. Now that's funny, because I didn't feel that much with it when I started out, but I came to feel that I was right with it, right close to some kind of important knowledge that I could communicate at the same time. Like you were almost speaking the unspeakable, quite wild. Or you stretched yourself as far as you could possibly stretch. When I'm speaking for Seth, it's a different kind of knowing that you try to pull down. It's a great feeling. End quote. And since we're at the end, let me add a very small session note from 934. It says, the entire idea of the magical approach is of itself sustaining. It should remind you of the true effortlessness that is in a fashion responsible for your very existence. When you become overly concerned or worried in any area, remember that you are thinking those thoughts, while the process of thinking is utterly effortless. That realization alone can further remind you that the conscious mind does not have to have all the information required. It only needs to have the faith that means are available, even if those means are beyond its own scope of activity. End quote. So, the next chapter is chapter 11, obviously, and there is literally only 2 chapters left. So, I hope you guys keep following along and be able to say, you read or heard an audiobook of this book. Chapter 11 is called The Magical Approach and the Relationships Between, quote-unquote, Conservation and Spontaneous Developments.